So for our last presentation today, we have the pleasure to welcoming on stage one of our students that was also with us before the graduate program. He's been with us, I think, maybe 2-3 years now. Luke, you can, 4 years? 3 years, Luke. And the student I'm about to present is the amazing Luke Walker. And please clap for Luke, big clap. Luke Walker, at 3 years old, Luke Walker began playing the steel pan. 3 years old, wow. As a member of Invaders, the world's oldest steel band, Walker is influenced by the traditional music of Trinidad and Tobago. He additionally studied classical piano and percussion, performing internationally with symphonic orchestra. While studying data science at Harvard University, he found a musical home in the world of global jazz, and we are very happy you found that with us here. The presentation is called Bridging the Gulf at Paria, sorry, and advisor Chase Mooring, and committee member Professor Ron Reed. Please clap for both of them. Thank you so much for being here. And Luke Walker, please come in.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I feel all the love. All right. When is my timer going to start? Let's go. All right. Just this really quick. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Luke Walker, and I'm a steel pan player from Trinidad and Tobago. It's a twin island republic in the Caribbean, just north of Venezuela. And I happen to also have Venezuelan ancestry. I took the opportunity during this master's program to explore this side of my identity for the first time. Now, the musical connections between these two places on the surface are clear. In Trinidad, we have a deep tradition of playing a type of Venezuelan folk music called parang or paranda around Christmas time. But in my research, I learned that the story is even richer. Venezuelan people have actively participated and contributed to Trini culture and vice versa. This is important to bring up now because currently there are tens of thousands of Venezuelan refugees who have fled to Trinidad due to economic hardship in the last decade. They often face xenophobia when they arrive, despite the ostensible multiculturalism of Trinidadian society. And in light of the plight of these people, my objective here in this project is to help reinstate the Venezuelan identity as a primary facet of Trinidadian society by appealing to the shared musical history of the two countries. And I relate to these issues personally as a person of mixed heritage. And as a musician, I desire to incorporate more of the rich Venezuelan musical tradition into my own sound and creative process. And because of this, I kind of divided my project into two parts, one highlighting some of the underappreciated historical details, and the other reflecting on my personal identity and experience with migration. So part one. How are these two countries connected? Well, at its closest point, Trinidad is just 7 miles away from Venezuela. And before there were any humans, millions of years ago, the land of Trinidad was actually part of mainland South America. So we actually share the same land, same flora and fauna. And then the first people who inhabited Trinidad were Native Americans who moved freely between these two places without any strict borders. So as a starting point, I wanted to invoke this literal common soil by writing a duet for pan and quattro. Now, the juxtaposition of these instruments, which symbolize Trinidad and Venezuela respectively, was itself significant to me. Now, this tune that you'll hear, the form is a Spanish waltz, which is commonly heard in Trinidad in the early 1900s, and this is inspired by Leonel Velasco. Thank you so much. So from this genesis, the two countries diverged, not only geologically, but later socially through 400 years of colonialism. This sense of common history is still evident in things like place names, food, and music, but today it is eclipsed by this pressing issue of the contemporary Venezuelan refugees I mentioned earlier. So in light of this, I wanted to highlight some real stories of Venezuelans participating in and contributing to two major aspects of Trinidadian culture, Kalinda and Calypso, with the hope of reminding us of our kinship. Kalinda is a stick-fighting martial art and dance developed by enslaved Africans in Trinidad. The songs that accompanied it, or chants, called lavaways, were precursors to calypsos. One of these lavaways tells a very interesting story of Venezuelans who would make the 20-minute boat ride across the Gulf to a fishing village called Maruga, where they participated in Kalinda ceremonies before returning home. And I incorporated this melody into this next piece called Orinoco Boamen. Thank you so much. Now, calypso music is one of the most distinctly Trinidadian art forms, and its development is commonly and rightfully attributed to ex-enslaved Africans in Trinidad. However, I wanted to highlight the often neglected influence of Venezuelan immigrants on this music, particularly after 1890, which saw a wave of migration due to the end of slavery. The stringed instruments that they brought, including the cuatro, changed the instrumentation of early calypsos, and their Spanish musical heritage also influenced the melodic and structural content of the songs. Calypso is a vocal tradition, but I'm translating it onto the pan, which for me becomes the voice of the music. And furthermore, there's currently a thriving calypso tradition in El Callao, Venezuela, where many Afro-West Indians migrated in the search of gold starting in 1850. And so here's an excerpt from a calypso that I wrote, inspired by the parallel developments of calypso in Trinidad and Venezuela. Thank you so much. As I was studying all of these historical facts, I was most inspired by how this history framed the way that I thought about my own personal heritage and my dreams for the future. My great-grandparents, Augusto and Leonie Montes de Oca, migrated to Trinidad from Venezuela. I don't know much about them, but I'm able to connect to them through this music. I found in my process that I didn't have to force all these musical connections to happen, because I found that they live through me, because I'm an actual living product of this mixing. I borrowed a little bit from Cuban danzón and Venezuelan joropo styles for this tune, in which I tried to capture my great-grandparents' love for each other and the excitement and uncertainty associated with settling in a foreign country, something I personally have dealt with. So you see, music can bridge barriers and even gulfs. In Trinidad, we love our parang music, which has its pride of place around Christmas time. But relegating all of our engagement with Venezuelan music to this season sort of diminishes the interconnectedness between Venezuelan and Trinidadian music. For any Trinis seeing this right now, I invite us to think of the pride that we have for calypso and soca and acknowledge that our Venezuelan brothers and sisters also have a share in this heritage. And for those of you who might not be from Trinidad, I think it's also relevant to all of us here, this international community at Berklee. And I think this shows us that music transcends borders and even languages. And it can help us connect with ancestors. So allow me for my final excerpt to dream a little bit. I hope for a future time when my descendants can explore their mixed heritage, freely moving between Trinidad and Venezuela, something I never had the opportunity to do. This last piece uses global jazz concepts such as comprovisation, zero gravity, and African-derived polyrhythms to portray this futuristic vision. And practically speaking, this points towards my future plans of this project. I hope to bring the music back home to Trinidad and conduct workshops and cross-cultural events with Venezuelan Trinidadians in collaboration with local nonprofits who support Venezuelan refugees. So I think this music has a key role to play in bridging these two communities, bringing these two communities together. And the good news is there's so much rich history to build off of. It's not just the power of music in the abstract, but as we've seen, there's so many connections that we have such a great starting place. And so this last tune is called Vinijwe, which is patois for come play. Hope you enjoy.
comments. Professor Reed? Any questions or comments?
Well, I've had the opportunity to work with Luke on this, even though it's been not as lengthy a period of time as maybe I would have hoped, but I remember when we started doing this and where it has ended up, and I could tell the kind of effort and the suggestions that have been made sure that have been included that has made his presentation very, very clear, and I hope it has been clear to all of you here about what his goals are and where he's going to end up could be almost a lifetime project, and I just want to congratulate you for doing this work and jump-starting some folks, many folks from Trinidad. I'm from Trinidad as well, and who might start thinking a little bit differently about the relationship between Venezuela and Trinidad, which is sometimes it's quite adversarial. I have a couple of questions, and I know that that time that just the length of time for your presentation has constricted you in some ways, but there was information that you needed to make sure that you share with the audience. My questions would be, it's a two-part question, is what other sources, musicians, composers that you looked at in terms of who are already on this part of exploring this type of relationship. For example, I think of the kind of work that say, for instance, I'm thinking of Jack Schwartzbart has been doing with his own Goka traditions of Guadeloupe and Martinique, and infusing that with his contemporary jazz playing. And the kind of research that he's been doing, his recordings are reflecting, his subsequent recordings are reflecting a more deeper interest and research into the Goka traditions. And maybe Etienne Charles, who's been looking at Trinidadian music. And so I wanted to ask you who might be some of those artists that you looked at who are exploring these traditions. This, for me, I know it's the first time that someone particularly has been using the steel pan as the voice, as you mentioned in your presentation, to look at this bridge between the development of Calypso in Venezuela and Trinidad. And this is, I want to encourage you on that path. And the second part would be if we had to walk away for some people who this information would be new to them, what is a nugget that you weren't able to include that you would give them that would set them on the path of really understanding the work that you're doing, and if they started their own research, they'd be on the right path in terms of finding the results for that research?
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to start off actually by really profusely thanking you, Professor Reed, and Danilo, and Marco, and Chase, who've provided so much support for me. I also want to mention Professor Leo Blanco, who couldn't be here with me today, but he's also been helping me along the journey. As we're speaking of people who I look up to, definitely I want to shout out Carlos Capacho, who played on these tracks, who's a Venezuelan cuatro player. Him alongside Jorge Glem, there's two cuatro players that are on the scene today who I really look up to. Carlos actually being an alum of this program, so they've been charting the path for me. But I want to go back a little bit where it started for me musically, this project, with the music of Lionel Belasco. I believe I mentioned his name, but he was a Trinidadian Venezuelan musician and composer in the early 1900s, and he was actually responsible for making Calypso popular in North America. And he wrote a lot of music. He was quite prolific. And so diving into his music, he was such a great resource for me of a window into this period of time, early 20th century, where a lot of this mixing was happening between Venezuelans and Trinidadians in Trinidad and in Venezuela as well. So that was the starting point for me, for realizing that, recognizing the lineage, which I think is one big lesson I've learned from my study of jazz at Berklee. Like, we have to first acknowledge the lineage of that we're not necessarily doing anything new. We're building off of these luminaries in our past. But of course, there are those today who are flying that flag. And you already mentioned Etienne, and I would also say he was a big inspiration for me. For the past few years, I've really admired how he's not only made beautiful music, but he's really supported that music with deep research and really important historical and musicological research of Trinidadian music and Afro-Caribbean and jazz music in general. And so a lot of young musicians these days, I think, have really seen the importance of research and of backing up what they claim, especially people who come from a place like us, a small country. And part of it maybe is that we feel like we want to have a say at the conversation and realize and prove to people that we're bringing something really valuable. And I see that he has been doing that. And for a while I've wondered, wow, Etienne has explored all these things, carnival, the calendar tradition, there's the steel pan, all of these things. Is there anything left for me to do? You know, he's kind of pushing the boundary. But through this project, I realized that there's still so much to discover. This is just one frontier that I've discovered that not many people are exploring, this Venezuelan-Trinidadian connection, especially with regards to calypso. As I mentioned, that's a less obvious route, less obvious link, which is typically eclipsed by the parang music that is on the surface. So that was a way of me following in his footsteps and realizing that, no, there's actually so much more to do, even though it's admiring all the work that he's done. And yeah, I would say that. And then one little nugget that people can take away from this. I think we tend to create this really strict dichotomy between English-speaking and Spanish-speaking places in general, but especially in the Caribbean, I feel like English Caribbean is in its own camp, and then the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, we don't really learn much about them in schools growing up. We're kind of divided there, but one major lesson I learned in this journey is that those divisions are much blurrier than you'd imagine. Like we have a very common history, common musical heritage, and one thing I would love people to take away from me is that these very strict dichotomies we've set up between musical cultures actually have so many interconnections. So that's just one thing that could lead you down so many rabbit holes, not only in Trinidad and Venezuela, but in other places in Central America, like Panama and a lot of countries where this music, when you hear the music played in different places, every place has its own really unique fingerprint, but we're all kind of tapping into the same spirit, I would say. So, yes.
Okay. All right. Pass the microphone to your advisor, Professor Chase Morin. Is the microphone still there? Somebody? Okay.
Wow. Luke, man, congratulations. This is what a stunning project, presentation, music, all coming together. You know, one thing I was thinking today, you know, with this final presentation is I think I was reminded of Pixar, actually. in the way that they have managed to create universal messages in their content. You know, that's just one example. There's a lot of other great filmmakers, of course. But in that kind of universal way that it can speak to all age ranges, people from all around the world, I think you created this with your presentation. I think this is one of the most universal, even though it's so specific, right?
Yeah.
Somehow I feel, as someone, for example, who's never been to Trinidad or Venezuela, I was like completely raptured, touched, moved on the journey with you. I was invested. And I think that's something really special that you've created here. That I can imagine this being in museums, being in artistic collaborations, in galleries, in movie theaters, in documentaries. I mean, the language, it's so clear, it's so concise, it's accessible but also deep and profound. It has so many layers to it, and the way you've put it all together in this presentation, and the music, which is extraordinary. It's, for me, that was the word I was thinking, universal, that you've created in this. That is really special. So I just want to congratulate you on that.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, all
Yeah.
glory to God.
Yeah, I really, it's unbelievable. And what you're doing on the pen, just acknowledging the music that you've created, wow. Like, to hear all the things that we've been working on here at Global, and to hear you representing them on your instrument, in your improvisations, to hear and to know the progress too, right? Because we like, what's it been, like 3 years or something like that, right? And to see where you've taken this instrument and your own personal music and composition, man, I'm so excited for the future, because you're really creating a really original, something that's never been done before on your music and your instrument. And that's, to me, it just like captures my ear right away, you know? So, yeah, congratulations on all of that. I'm so happy for you. And I really like, you know, I can imagine, like I said, I can imagine this in so many settings, and I think it really speaks to everyone. So, so yeah, I'm just really excited to see how you continue this collaboration, continue both this personal story, but this story I think that speaks to so many people. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Chase.
Okay. Thank you, Chase, so much. Duke, first of all, congratulations. You entered Global during the pandemic here, is that correct? Yes. Right, so 3 years ago, and it's very emotional for, I think, for all of us that saw your journey to see you finish with such a wonderful statement. And what I think that the first thing I want to tell you that I love about your project is you're in a world where we always tend to disconnect, right? And everybody's sort of like defending a piece of a garden, right? You do the opposite, right? You're creating a beautiful connection, you know, between your country and Venezuela. And now that I heard your comment, Professor Reed, about that this relationship is not always, you know, friendly, even more I think that your project it's not just important, it's probably essential to better understand, you know, the culture that you're representing. When I first met Maestro Danilo Perez, the thing that really, one of the things that really, you know, it made me enthusiastic was that he was one of the few people doing that, you know, in music education, where everything is disconnected, everything is sort of like taught into little pieces. He was the first one that I was hearing making this, connecting everything, especially the music in America. And I think that you really, in a way, kind of cultivated like a very important value at Global. So that's my first comment, and I love that. It's also great to see our alumni Carlos being part of this. You know, he actually presented about Venezuela, and so this, in a way, I feel like, you know, your thesis was about the Cuatro Venezuela, and I feel like you're sort of like closing a circle and adding so much to that narrative. On a personal level, the music, you know, there's so much that you're representing in your music, but I finally hear your spirit, and I feel you're there's such a light in you, and I feel in your music, and that's, to me, is very special. And maybe it's personal, but I felt that, okay? I have a couple of questions for you. One, in your first song, you said that the steel pan is symbolic of Trinidad. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, exactly. Yes, so the steel pan was invented in Trinidad in the 1940s. It didn't come out of nothing. It can be traced back to the drums of the enslaved Africans that they would play. And through many different iterations, those drums, due to the banning of the instruments, the rhythms were transferred to bamboo in the case of Trinidad. In other places, it was tap dance. In other places, it was congas, cajons, you know. But in Trinidad specifically, the rhythm transferred from from the drumming to the bamboo, then later on through metal instruments, and then the metal instruments were tuned. And so through some really genius developments, actually, in the grassroots of Trinidad, this instrument was born. So I think it's really a product of the soil, of the people of Trinidad, and definitely it's emblematic of Trinidad there. And then the cuatro, of course, I see it as emblematic of Venezuela. So the juxtaposition of those two instruments, I think that immediately evoked what I was trying to arrive at, the unity, the common unity that we started off with.
That's wonderful. The second question is, many people here, they may not know that we just came back from Panama 3-4 weeks ago. We were in Bocos del Toros, and I was actually talking with your dad about how when I saw you there, I saw you were connected with something, that I saw you were playing calypso with the band, and I saw in your eyes there was something that was very special. Can you talk a little bit about that? What was that?
Yes. So thank you to the Institute for giving me the opportunity to head to Panama. And we got a really special treat for the very first time. The Institute went to Bocas del Toro, which is an archipelago in the east of the country, in the Caribbean. And it was actually really significant for the history of jazz. And there's a lot of connections between there and New Orleans, some really important jazz musicians like Louis Russell that were born there. So it was really important that we go there. And one thing I really discovered once I got there, I went, as soon as you touch down, as soon as you land in Bocas del Toro, you don't even get your baggages yet. There's a man who comes in the airport and starts singing calypso. I'm there looking, where's my pan? Because, traveling with an instrument is nerve-wracking. So I'm like, where's my pan? And in the background I hear, Matilda, 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 she take my money and run Venezuela. I'm like, am I in Trinidad? Did I arrive in Trinidad? So from the very first, my first steps in the island, I realized something much bigger than I thought is happening here. Again, and the point I brought up in response to Professor Reed's question, I think it's really challenged my preconceived notions of what Spanish-speaking Caribbean and English-speaking Caribbean, these distinctions that we've set up, because I just feel so proud that we have this music, calypso, that is our gift to the world, Trinidad's gift to the world, that is so symbolic of our culture, so important to our culture, but it has served these other places in just the same way as it served us. It served us as a means of cultural retention, as a means of maintaining the history through oral tradition. And the same thing happened in these other places that don't even speak English or have some connection to the English language, but through many generations, it's the music that has actually maintained those connections. And so even down to the way they sing, the accents, in Trinidad we sing parang in Spanish, but most of us don't speak a word of Spanish, so any Spanish speaker goes to be like, well, what are they saying? Similar things sometimes happen with the Spanish speakers singing calypso, but it's so fascinating. They're singing, they're sounding like Trinis speaking English. And for somehow I think that if it wasn't for that music, that connection would be lost. And I was amazed at the same exact story that happened in El Callao. Well, there's Afro-West Indians who moved there to work in mines, brought with them their instruments, their music, and retained that to the current day. The exact same thing happened in Panama. Due to the United Fruit Company, there was, and obviously the Panama Canal, there were West Indian immigrants from Jamaica, Trinidad, and the islands coming across to Bocas del Toro, and the same thing happened. They brought their instruments, their music, and it survives to this day. So again, I think this is a real frontier for further research, further study, and just such a cool thing that I found, and I would not have discovered if it weren't for the program. So thank you.
Great, Rahul.
My brother Luke, congratulations. This is fantastic. I have some notes here. I just want to bring it to the attention because, a lot of times we use the words like the terminologies, like it's easy to say, oh, that's calypso, that's music. It's not really music. If you look at the history of this, it's a sound of resistance for me. And it's important that you are connecting to a fight that started many years ago. and that you are embracing it in such a professorial way, in such a academic environment that you could put it the way you put it. I am sure that all these people that have been through the development of this will be very proud of you. And this is the message, that the blessings that the effort, there's somebody nowadays willing to continue that journey. That's a very, and this connects to the Pan-African movement, to Marcus Garvey, to all this desire to unite the African culture everywhere. And that instrument, as people might see, oh, that's just make like few notes. You are actually embracing the power of the meaning of what that instrument means to a society. But also you are actually developing a concept that we talk about, the tetrachord world, the tetra world, and you're actually embracing it very deeply. I heard stuff there that I've not heard commonly. 15 was there. You're really, really using the instrument to embrace, like the sounds that you're getting out of there are very, I can hear this, I can tell that's you. And that has a lot of values, identity, freedom, the idea to present this message in a hopeful way. It's very hopeful the way you're presenting this. It has so much meaning for the academic world we live on. So my congratulations. I had to just make a couple comments in terms of like, I will challenge to use this instrument for the fight of social justice that it already started that way, and gender equity. That image of the kids playing at the end went right to my heart, man. And where you are with them, you are with the citizens, with the children, and you're going to take that instrument for change in the world. That came across very strong. That's powerful, my brother. You got to continue on that. I see you going doing UN tours and seriously, and UNESCO and UNICEF. At a certain point, I had to make a comment. Some of the mixes we need to look into. Like at the point, the violin was too loud, and I could have used more drums. You know what I mean? So inviting you to raise awareness for social justice and gender equity through the steel pan. That could be a nice topic right there. This is the definition of BJI. Promotes global jazz music that is inclusive and welcoming of different nationalities, indigenous instrument, folk music, combined with jazz as an anchor base. It is a place where creative music, social activism, and interconnected learning find their common tones. You did it. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, thank you so much. Yes, those were my nieces and nephews that you saw on the screen. Yeah, Zara, Ethan, Jasmine, Yuri. They have and Ethan. They have so much music in them already. It's just in their blood. Yeah, and the part you mentioned about tetrachords, that's what we love here at Global. But really, it meant a lot for me coming to Global. When I stepped into Chase's class on harmonic considerations in my first semester at Global, I quickly learned that this was giving me a language for sounds that I'd already been hearing, already been experimenting with, but didn't really understand. It was just coming, and I was hearing these things, but it really gave me language and tools to speak about that. And that was just the start of all of this. And it really means a lot to me to be able to stand here after those 3 years and really see that I learned so much in this program. But just the value in having language and terms and experience and hearing from people who've done it, just I attribute all of that growth to you all. So thank you so much.
Luke Walker, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
A big clap to the families here too, from Trinidad. Yes. Mom and Dad. Woo! Congratulations to all of you.